Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to to tonight's webinar. Tonight we're going to be talking about lower body mechanics, but more importantly, training lower body mechanics, especially training the movement pattern themselves. Real quick before we start, just a brief introduction. My name is Chris Welch. I'm a biomedical engineer, and I've been doing motion analysis for about 17 years now, since 1990. I started at the American Sports Medicine Institute in Birmingham, and then did some research with the Biomotion Foundation branch in West Palm Beach, and then started HPT, which is the predecessor to Welch Technologies in the early to mid 90s, probably roughly 95, and we've been providing motion analysis services since then to some really great people, from golf to baseball and everything in between. The seminars themselves are based on trying in this new era of the industry, whether it be teaching or therapy or training, starting to utilize new technologies, especially motion analysis and spin-offs of motion analysis like EMG and force plate technology, to actually do clinical diagnostics. We thought it would be great to start a webinar series where people could start to learn a little bit more about the technology, the application of the technology, and then ramifications specific to functional training and therapy and coaching. So one other quick thing before we get started into tonight's webinar. Any questions you might have, and I have a feeling tonight there might be more than usual about different aspects of the training stuff, just type them in to the question and answer panel, and I will, as always, answer those questions. I try to group them into categories and then answer them in a video format, and then post them on our website along with the recorded versions of these seminars. So if you're not aware, all the seminars are recorded, and or webinars, I guess, are recorded, and question and answer segments are recorded, and they're all posted on our website at welch-e.com, which is actually right here. And if you go to the seminar or webinar section, you'll see a whole listing of all the webinars and links to all the videos. So tonight's webinar is going to be a little bit shorter than a couple that we've done here recently, where we've covered the actual biomechanics stuff, and it's taken us pretty much the full hour. Tonight we'll probably be looking at somewhere between 30 to 40 minutes. I'm just going to do a real brief overview of the mechanics part, refresh everyone's memory. If you haven't been, you may want to also go back to some of the past webinars that are online at our website and do a refresher on the actual mechanics stuff. But I'll do a quick overview today. We'll look at the graphs a little bit so we know what kind of patterns that we're actually looking to try to produce, and then we'll get into a whole bunch of training concept stuff. And the training stuff is really going to be functional training. It's not going to be gym training, and it's not going to be golf instruction like you might do on the lesson tee. It's really going to be somewhere in between, where we're looking at moving strength, conditioning, flexibility that we gain in the gym over to the practice tee using functional training concepts and functional training movement patterns. So, which I think is one of those areas that has been missing a lot in the past. However, the concepts have ramifications both directions. There's going to be a lot of crossover to things you can do in the gym in sort of less functional kind of training, your more traditional concept stuff. And it also has a lot, there's a lot of carryover to the lesson tee as well, although what we are going to be looking at is similar to golf swing movement. It's not really golf swing technique, but if you understand the patterns as a golf instructor, you can take some of these training concepts and employ them in your teaching on the lesson tee. So there'll be crossover to both sides. We'll be focused primarily on the functional movement stuff. So what I'll do here is just do a quick overview of lower body mechanics, just so that it'll be a refresher for some of you that have been a part of this for the last few weeks. And if you're new, we'll just do a quick overview so you have a basic idea of what we're talking about. As far as lower body mechanics go, essentially what we've done is we've defined mechanics in two components, linear and rotational. Linear component we've defined as the interaction of the center of mass and the center of pressure, sort of your ability to create forward momentum. The rotational component being the ground reaction to the shear force applied by the feet, which in turn creates force coupling and torque at the hips, which is how we create rotational speed at the pelvis. Very quickly, when we stand on the ground, there's two types of force being applied to the ground. There's our normal force, which is perpendicular to the surface. So that's, you know, your bathroom scale weight, you know, the downward force that's applied perpendicular to the surface. Unless we're doing a vertical movement, like say vertical jumping, downward force is predominantly going to be used to create friction. The other components of force being applied into the ground are what we'll call shear force, and those forces are going to be applied parallel to the surface of the ground or along the surface of the ground. Those forces, in contrast, are much, much smaller in terms of their magnitude. However, they're absolutely crucial to be able to create movement itself, and especially in diagonal acceleration patterns like the golf swing, they're absolutely crucial. They're the key component to creating torque, which is how we actually create rotational speed, and then that rotational speed transferred through the body as a function of the kinetic link. So just a quick overview as to how this works. When you're standing in equilibrium, you're not moving. Your center of mass, which you can consider, you know, sort of your belly button area, your midsection area, your center of mass is essentially aligned over your center of pressure. So as long as you stay in equilibrium, you're not falling or walking or moving, your center of mass tends to align itself over the center of pressure. And the center of pressure is just a weighted average of the force applied by the feet over the surface area, and then a weighted average between those 2 feet. So we get a center of pressure between the 2 feet or within the base of our foundation. When we start to move, however, we have to move out of equilibrium. We have to create some sort of forward momentum. So if you think the easiest way to think of this is a baseball swing or some sort of stride movement where the front leg is lifted off the ground. And when the front leg is lifted off the ground, the center of pressure moves to the rear foot. Obviously the front foot no longer on the ground. So we have a situation, kind of a dynamic situation now, where the center of pressure is over here. For a brief instant in time, the center of mass is ahead of the center of pressure, and unless you move your center of mass over here to balance again on one leg, the center of mass essentially being ahead of the center of pressure forces you to fall that direction. As you fall that direction, say in terms of, like, say, a baseball swing, you place your foot down, and as you press into the ground, you create friction at both the back side and the front side, and then as you press into the ground, you then push along the surface of the ground to create torque. So you're going to push this direction as you first initially start. Let me erase my drawings here, make it a little more clear. You'll end up pushing this direction, or if you look at the resultant, this direction and this direction from the rear foot. So if you're moving that way in the golf swing, the ground pushes back with equal and opposite force, and what you get is a force couple or torque, and that is translated through the legs into the pelvis, and the pelvis then begins to accelerate rotationally in a counterclockwise way, and that's how we start the kinetic link. So essentially, lower body mechanics are the ability to manipulate the center of mass, center of pressure to create forward momentum, and then use that forward momentum to create torque. It's absolutely crucial. It's probably the most crucial part of any distal end acceleration pattern, but certainly swing patterns like the golf swing. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're talking about with respect to the mechanics of what's going on. Again, that's a quick overview. If you want more detailed explanation, the two previous webinars we covered in a lot more detail. Some would say probably overwhelmingly boring detail. Let's move on to a very quick overview of what this looks like from a pattern perspective, and then we'll get right into the drill stuff or exercise stuff. And like I said, this won't be an exceptionally long webinar, but hopefully I think you'll really like this stuff, and I think that you'll probably have a lot of really good questions. So again, type those questions in, and I'll get right on it and answer them and post those up here within the next week so that you can have some follow-up discussion. So when we look at movement analysis, or when we look at 3D motion analysis with respect to the lower body mechanics, what we end up essentially looking at, since we don't have force plates under the feet, if we had force plates, we could actually look at the torque that was being created, which would be really great. But essentially, at the end of the day, even if we had force plates, what we'd be looking at would be the relationship of the center of mass along the target line and the pelvis rotational movement. And what we know is that when you look at a population of elite level players, what they end up doing is, and just like we just described, they press forward. So as they come back into the backswing, here, let's go. As they come back into the backswing, they will press their center of mass forward, their center pressure forward. They'll press forward. As they take their swing back, there's a slight shift in the center of mass or center of pressure, and that's that forward momentum. It's a lot more difficult to create that shift than it is if you lift your leg and stride forward. And you'll see in a lot of the exercises, what we do with people who don't do that pattern very well is we help them out by letting them lift their foot and get the idea that in order to create a press, you want to maintain some stability, and you don't want to let your pelvis slide and sway and things like that. So we'll get to that in a second. So what happens is the center of mass is pressed forward. So essentially the center of mass here is pressed forward, and it's that pressing forward that creates shear force at the feet, and that shear force at the feet is translated into torque. So what we look at the graph here is the movement of the center of mass forward prior to any real rotation. So the red line being our rotation. So you can see the blue line moves positive, which is down the target line, as a function of creating that torque, and as we create torque, then we get lower body acceleration. As we then move, we get torque creating lower body speed, and then that speed's transferred out through. The other thing, and we don't see it in this graph, is that as we get close to impact, what you're going to see is the lateral movement stops. So you have essentially the Z pattern where you get a positive forward movement of the center mass creating shear, and then stability or bracing at this side at the point of release. You also will get some flattening of the rotational curve before it then releases in follow through, and the combination of bracing here and here is called, Stu McGill would refer to as like super stiffening, and we might call it stability or bracing, but it's that ability of the lower body to stabilize at the point of release out to the club that allows a fuller release. So we're talking about breakdown in mechanics and how we can restore movement pattern or train movement pattern for the first time. There's a lot of reasons why people have issues with their lower body mechanics. It can be lower body issue. There can be range of motion or mobility issues at the pelvis, at the hips. They can have issues at their feet, ankles, knees. So a whole host of lower body issues, even lower spine or back issues. Then there's a whole category of issues that are upper body specific that pull people out of posture and force lower body mechanics to be sacrificed, where they're recruiting mobility from areas of stability like lower body and spine. But regardless of what those issues are, and obviously if you have side issues like pelvic mobility issues or shoulder issues, you have to deal with those and resolve those. But regardless of that, at the end of the day, if you've been moving around a structural limitation for so many years or so many repetitions, you have a pattern that needs to be retrained. And so regardless of what the issues are with your lower body mechanics and why they have occurred, we need, at some point, if you have faulty lower body mechanics, we need to retrain those mechanics. And if you have reasonable mechanics or movement but aren't creating the speed or the power output, again, we have to work at that level. So we have to either retrain or create speed at the lower body, even if the issue isn't even necessarily a lower body issue. So regardless of how we get here, we still have to train or retrain lower body movement. Okay. All that being said, the boring stuff out of the way, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look at some techniques for creating lower body movement pattern first, and then creating speed or torque at the lower body. And what I want to preface this with is that these are concepts of movement. I mean, they can be used directly and are very effective. We've been training and testing these for more than a decade now, in testing the patterns and the impact on patterns of movement. So as in and of themselves, they're very effective exercises. However, not only are they effective exercises, but they're effective concepts. And there are literally thousands, well, maybe not thousands, but hundreds of variations, really, of employing these patterns or these concepts. And you can, like I said, cross it over to the gym and take some of these concepts and sort of manifest them in your gym workouts, your functional gym workouts. And you can also take the concepts and start to manifest them in your teaching on the lesson tee as well. So there isn't there isn't just one way to do these, but the concepts have to be employed. And once you understand the concepts, you can have a whole variety of different movements. First, because variety is great, it stimulates the nervous system, stimulates the body, and secondarily because not everyone responds or reacts the same way to any one given movement pattern, and some people like, or respond better to certain variations. So, all that being said, what you should be able to see now is a picture of me standing in our office in a sort of a red tank top, white shirt, and black pants. I'm going to apologize out front because there is a slight bit of lag, and so when I flip through the video frames, you may get a little bit of a lag, but in the recorded version there won't be a lag. So if it gets to be tough, you can always view the recorded version later. So the first pattern that we always start with, and that I think from a concept standpoint is the best place to start, especially with somebody who has a lot of lateral movement. So if someone who's swaying back and forth, someone who pushes back and up rather than turning into the pelvis, in other words, on the backswing rather than creating internal rotation at the right hip, they tend to hike the hip and lean backwards and sort of forfeit lower body stability. Teaching someone right off the bat how to press forward, this is really super simple, looks incredibly almost goofy simple, but teaching someone to press forward is absolutely crucial because it's the foundation of virtually all the other drills and all the other exercises that we're going to do. So what we do is we have them stand in a more upright posture than your golf swing. So I'm still in an athletic posture. I still have some sort of S-curve and some pelvic tilt, kind of a ready athletic posture, but I'm not bent over 30, 35 degrees in a normal golf posture. So we try to make it easier on them. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to teach them how to press forward, which is what a lot of golfers don't understand how to do neuromechanically, and then turn perpendicular to their spine so that we don't have this swaying action where they end up more than turning, sliding, and then they don't get good rotation. So the way the exercise works is we have them stand in what we call ready position or neutral position. I'm pointing to my sternum and my belt buckle because I don't want any separation, because I don't want my lower body sort of flitting off this direction while the upper body hangs back and we get like a teeter-totter effect. So I have them point at their sternum and their belt buckle and just make sure that stays in a straight line. Now again, this isn't golf technique, so this isn't golf plane posture and everything, but what we're trying to do is teach them to press forward. So I'll show you the way this goes is then they press from their rear foot. I'm going to get moving. Now again, there's going to be a delay on your end, and I apologize for that, but basically what they're going to do is they're going to press forward from the rear side to the front side. All right, so now we're getting into the movement. I'll try to go slower so there's not quite such a lag. So all I'm doing is turning and pressing forward. The key here is a really simplistic movement pattern, but from this side, I'm pressing against the ground this direction. So that ground reaction is being translated to this. On the front side, since I'm pushing my center of pressure this way, I'm creating shear. I'm creating shear this direction. The ground pushing back. I'm getting an appropriate pattern, and my hips and my torso, but especially my hips, are really working perpendicular to the spine. Once you start getting over the golf postures and everything, it gets a lot more difficult for people, so we start right here. The other thing that we're teaching them to do is we're teaching them to internally rotate into this left hip, Because what happens is, whether it's a structural limitation or just a movement pattern problem, they end up hiking and sliding. They don't really get internal rotation at the left hip. And that's absolutely crucial to this press torque pattern. So when they end up, at the end of the day, they just keep pressing forward. They end up balanced over the left side, pivoted on the right side, so they've pressed forward, and we don't want them to slide or open. We want them to rotate into the pelvis, or into the left hip. Seems like an overly simplistic, almost goofy simplistic exercise, but believe it or not, when you see breakdown in motion patterns, like if you're using a motion analysis product like ZenoLink or whatever, most of these people cannot do this drill or exercise at first. They end up doing everything but turn. They'll slide and hang back and open their pelvis, and they won't be able to get off of this and move to this side. They'll hang back on. All kinds of crazy stuff will happen, but within a few tries you can get them to do this. You're already developing a movement pattern. You're already affecting the nervous system. You're already creating a skill. So within a very short period of time, even in a matter of reps, you can get people to start to do this. They start to understand the feel. So it's a very simplistic pattern, but it's absolutely crucial, because literally every other thing that we do, and not just lower body drills, but just about everything we do, relies on the fact that they can step press or press forward as opposed to slide and turn. So I will just very quickly try to replay this again. I know there's a bit of a lag, but just bear with the lag and you'll kind of get the basic feel. Okay, so I'm going to start in a neutral position. It also helps when you're teaching somebody for the first time. It helps if you stagger. So I have this foot pretty much pointed forward. I've closed my stance maybe 10 or 15 degrees, and I've opened my foot up maybe 30 degrees. If this is 0, about 30 degrees here. Make it easier on your client to make the pattern. And if you stagger the stance and open the front foot a bit, it'll be a lot easier. Also, don't let them get too wide. Make sure they keep their base, at about shoulder width apart. Otherwise, it'll be difficult for them to press forward off of this front side. They'll feel like they're going to want to hang back, and then you're basically developing a faulty pattern. So if any of you guys have pressure plates, or maybe the dynamic balance system, or anything that measures foot reaction or pressure, you'll notice that when a golfer presses forward, their center of pressure moves from the rear of the left foot out a bit, and then over to the midfoot, and then back to the heel. This, believe it or not, this simple pattern does exactly that. If you're standing on a pressure pad, or some sort of balance measure or whatever, you will get that exact pattern when they do this right. So you're teaching the body how to push against the ground and press forward. Very simple, absolutely crucial to everything else we do. Okay. Now, once we've developed the ability to press forward, we now want to create torque patterns while they're creating separation. So here I am sitting on a stability ball, or like a Swiss ball or whatever. This ball is probably a hair too short, and I took air out of it for something else I'm going to do. So I'm squatting or sitting down a bit more than I would like. I'd rather just be sitting on a large Swiss ball that's not quite so deflated, so that I'm a little bit more in like just a normal sitting posture. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate my upper body. Again, we're more upright. Don't worry about the fact that we're not in golf swing postures right now. I'm more upright, but I'm not in I'm still in an athletic posture. I still have some S-curve to my spine. My pelvis is still tilted a little bit. And I'm sitting in this ball, and I've got a good grip on the ground, okay? And that's important, because what's going to happen is, the reason we do this is because most times people, when they're standing on their feet, it seems overly simple, but they have a really hard time negotiating twisting and turning while they're standing on their feet. So their pelvis starts sliding around and kind of dipping and swaying, and obviously you can't develop good patterns if you've got that motion in there. So we try to step them to that pattern by starting them in places where they literally can't sway, and that's one of these is sitting on the ground. Now, the reason I have them sitting on a ball, you could do this on a chair as well. The reason I have them sit on the ball is that they still have to create some stability, and better yet, they really have to connect with their feet, because what will happen is, and what I'm going to just progress this drill forward a little bit. What I do is I turn my upper torso perpendicular to my spine now, and what I want to feel is I want to feel stretch all the way across down into my left side or left hip. So I want to feel stretch all the way down through the torso, obliques, right into my pelvis. I want to feel some muscular tension there. What you don't see, what you don't understand, what's absolutely crucial to this exercise is that underneath, if I was sitting on this ball and I had force plates, okay, under my feet, if I do this exercise correctly, then I'm actually, even though my lower body isn't moving, I'm actually creating reverse torque patterns under my feet that are identical to the patterns that you want to create to actually create hip speed, counterclockwise hip speed from torque. So we're isolating the movement, and believe it or not, even though they're sitting on the ball, they're pushing with their feet really hard to maintain this position as they turn this direction. So what happens is that we get a really great lower body torque pattern, what they normally won't be able to create when they're standing up or taking a golf swing. So we're creating that pattern, we're forcing that pattern, and we're stimulating the nervous system as we go along. So we're getting a really good response. And we're teaching the upper body to work perpendicular to your spine, and a lot of that has to do with how you stabilize your lower body. So we're forcing the issue by sitting on the ball, but we're getting a great response both at the pelvis, the feet, and through the core. So we're really training, well, no, this trains a lot of things, but really training lower body patterns. So I'll go ahead and finish the drill. So then I get to a stretch point, and then what I do is I contract and shorten and come back to neutral slowly. Here we go. So I come back to neutral, and I know you guys are seeing this in delayed fashion, so just bear with that. And then I come back to neutral. So what's great about that is, well, when I don't move my pelvis, and of course in the golf swing the pelvis moves freely, but still, when I don't move my pelvis in this particular exercise, and I contract through the core to turn my upper body counterclockwise, I was creating forward torque. Now I'm creating the opposite torque with my feet to stabilize, to allow the contraction, which is the first step in creating the super stiffening that like someone like Stu McGill refers to, or the bracing that allows you to snap the club out away from the arms. So in this really simplistic drill or exercise, you get a ton of benefit. And we're just talking about the lower body stuff today, but it's amazing if you have access to force plates and motion analysis equipment or whatever, and you have at this and try this, you'll see it's an amazing, what you get to elicit out of the body is amazing. And again, we've been testing this for over a decade now, so we've seen it over and over and over again. Now, I'm going to try to move a little bit faster because I don't want to drag out forever. But so then what the next step of this process, and again, you can see, and what I wanted to do is give you stuff to think about and even to use today, but also just sort of put the concepts out there. And you can see how we keep stepping, right? We want to step the movement from teaching a forward press to then sitting on the ball and creating patterns without having to negotiate standing and then standing. But now what we do when we stand is we have them squeeze the ball between their knees. And what happens when they squeeze the ball between their knees is they have to press hard into the ground to create enough torque to actually push against the ball. So the ball has to be big enough that you're actually creating some force to push your knees in. The other thing it does is it forces people to keep in posture. Now, it's not a given because they can still twist and swivel and move, but it's a lot harder, and it's a proprioceptive reminder that they want to keep their lower body still. And again, we'll get into movement of the lower body, but right now we're trying to teach patterns without, once they start moving, if they don't have a good foundation, all kinds of crazy stuff happens. So we want to keep away from that until they've developed pretty good patterns. So again, here what we do is we have them go through this basic separation drill. a lot of people will think that this exercise or drill, whatever you want to call it, is about creating separation, about how much X factor you can create or whatever you want to call it. It's not. It's about how you grip the ground. Everything starts at the ground, and this exercise really, if you do it well, you will elicit beautiful lower body torque patterns and center of pressure movement. If you don't do it well, you can still look like you're creating separation, but your center of mass is all over the place, and your torque patterns are crazy, and you're not really getting any benefit out of this. So this exercise is not about X factor. This exercise is about feet gripping the ground and creating torque. The X factor stuff, or whatever you want to call it, is just a side product. So here what we have is as we come again in this direction, we're not moving our lower body, but lo and behold, we've got beautiful, perfect torque patterns being created under our feet. Those patterns being created and then translated ultimately to the pelvis. And when we get this ball out of there and we let you fire, once you've got those patterns down, you're going to go crazy. You're just gonna create all kinds of great lower body action and speed. So then, again, what you do is then you come back to, we'll call it neutral. So once you've created the separation, you then, holding your lower body still, come back to neutral. And what that does is teaches you how to stretch, shorten through the core, which was not what we're talking about today, but more importantly, you create the reverse torque that you just created at the feet, and that's your stabilization torque, and that's where you get your stiffening effect or your release effect. So you're training a whole lot of things very effectively in some really simplistic movement patterns. The key is understanding the patterns, understanding what you're trying to get out of them, and making sure that people do them right. If you just get someone up there that just is turning their shoulders around and isn't gripping the ground, and isn't creating tension through the core and isolating the pelvis and all that, they might as well go home. I mean, they might as well not even be doing this. So it's really important to understand what it is you're trying to get out of this. All right. Okay, so now, and this is a little bit dark because I had to shutter so that you could see the club, otherwise it'd be a big blur. So it's a little bit darker, so it's a little bit tougher to see, and I know there's a lag still. So okay, where are we at now? Okay, so the first part of that stuff was to create some basic movement patterns. They're sort of your simplistic level 1 progressive skills type of stuff. Now, when you get into swing dynamics, again, you want to stagger or wean somebody from forced behavior into letting them create the behavior by themselves. But if you just let them create the behavior by themselves the first try, 9 times out of 10 they won't get it, and they'll just keep reinforcing bad pattern. So what we do with this drill is what you see here is the same thing I just got done doing. I'm isolating my lower body with the ball between my legs. So I'm creating good pressure into the ground, so I'm forcing the person to root and to grip the ground. I'm eliminating a lot of lateral movement, a lot of spinning and turning and swaying, because the ball keeps me from doing that. Not only the ball, but the force I'm exerting to keep the ball between my knees. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get in that turned position. Now again, I'm a little bit more in a golf posture, but still you can see I'm going to swing at a bag up here. I'm not be swinging at a ball. So my posture is still more upright than it is in a golf, because we're trying to make it easier on people to begin with. So then what I'm going to do then is I'm going to do, in effect, the same drill I just did standing with my arms crossed, or arms up on my shoulders, with a club. And so what you do here is you don't allow them to do any kind of loading by lifting their arms or turning their pelvis. From a static stop position, what you're going to do is you're going to then have them fire, and what we're forcing them to do is fire through the core. But believe it or not, they're going to actually have a quick burst of lower body speed, even though we've almost completely isolated lower body. When we measure this using 3D motion analysis, you'll see that they actually create lower body speed, because they're starting to twist at their pelvis a little bit rather than sway and slide. And so they're actually becoming really effective at creating torque. Even with it being isolated, you'll see a burst of speed. Not what they will when you remove it, but it's really fantastic to see. And now what you're going to see, though, is in this exercise is the person then accelerates, and you can see even there, you can see I've got a little bit of rotation, but the person accelerates down into impact with the bag, okay? Without moving the lower body and without using any upward or pumping action, just by just contracting the muscles and flying forward with the swing action. And then what we have them do with the impact bag is we have them pop the bag. We don't have them swing through. We have them pop the bag. And the reason we have them pop the bag, so what you can see is I hold the position the best that I can and let the bag fly away from the club. And the reason I do that is when I pop, I'm forcing super stiffening or bracing, because in order to stop your arms from going, everything has to brace from the ground up. So you get that reverse torque that we talked about, even more greatly enhanced. So again, you wouldn't hit golf balls like this, but in the golf swing, you just take a normal fluid movement. But in the movement, you're actually going to have, in brief instant in time, you're going to have stiffening where literally the pelvis stops, comes close to stopping, and literally everything just holds for a brief, like milliseconds of time, to allow the club to fly away from the arms. In the best swings, that's what's happening. So we're teaching that impact force or that stiffening force by popping the bag as opposed to swinging through the bag. So on the one hand, what we've done is, if we move back on this drill, from here what we've done is we've created the ability to create lower body acceleration, effective transfer to the club, to the arms and the club, and then lower body stability at the point of impact by stabilizing the club and holding it still, letting the bag fly away from the club. Okay, so that's the first, and we would call, if you're familiar with say plyometrics, this would be sort of akin to like a short response plyometric, because we're really only getting a quick stretch shorten on the core based on a really short range of motion burst by the lower body. So this is a fantastic segment or segue into swing pattern kind of stuff. Now, the next iteration would be the same action. I'm just going to get down to the action without the ball. Okay, so let me forward down. I do the same thing now without the ball. I hit the bag, I stop my arms, and let the bag move away from the club as a function of sort of a stabilization and not a swing through. The key to this one, though, is you really need to make sure that they don't let their lower body run away from you or from themselves. You don't want that lower body running away. You release the ball, and all of a sudden they slide forward and zip, their lower body goes, and then they have no real torque creation, no real ability to transfer, and then they have no real good ability to decelerate and to create that stiffening. So you got to watch them really close on this one, because you're weaning them away from that ball. You're weaning them away from that ball, but you got to make sure, I have a little bit of turning, but I'm not allowing my lower body to run away. So that's the progression there. So this is, if you sort of think of it as short response plyometrics, building a base of movement from the ground up, and then we get to the point where we are not using the ball. Then the last iteration of this, sorry. I wonder if I skipped. Well, the last iteration of this would be to remove the bag and just have them take a swing through. So in other words, I may not have put that drill in here, but essentially you can think of it this way. Let me move right to think of it this way. Now we have them do the same movement as they progress through. The bag is out of there, and we just have them swing through normally. So in this case, there's no super stiffening action. We just have them swing through. The key is though, when they just swing through without the bag in this area, if you're measuring them on force plates with motion analysis, they will start stiffening to release the club and then allowing themselves to follow through. So it's really fantastic progression. All right, so let's go ahead to another movement. Okay, so the first movement we had, we were isolating the lower body and really keeping the body from swaying or dipping or moving or spinning or any kind of crazy stuff that detracts from lower body contribution and lower body mechanics. Now that we've developed those patterns and we're pretty comfortable that the person at least has the foundation, we can start to enhance lower body contribution, and one of the ways to do that is by having them step. So in this particular exercise, we have them move the bag. Now the bag is going to be out away from them quite a bit. Right? This is far out and it's up in front, and we kind of want them swinging out into this area to allow themselves to move away and also aid them to move perpendicular to their spine. And what we're going to have them do is we're going to have them step forward. We're going to have them stagger their stance and stride with their foot about 30 degrees open. If this is neutral, 30 degrees this direction. So it's a lot like a baseball stride. Okay, and what this does is it promotes forward weight transfer or forward press, and it also gives them, because they're stepping, more enhanced forward movement, so they're going to create more hip speed. So in a way, it's kind of like overspeed training for the pelvis. They're going to create more hip speed than they would if they weren't stepping. So you get the muscles firing at speeds that are greater than they're going to create in their golf swing. So it's a bit of kind of an overspeed concept, and there also is a little bit of a long response plyometric involved in this. And at the same time, obviously at the baseline, we're trying to create good torque patterns with the lower body. So the way this works, I'll go through the exercise. And then I'll try to explain with some diagrams. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the club away from the bag and striding forward at the exact same time. As soon as my front foot hits the ground, as soon as it touches the ground, I do everything in my power to change direction into a downswing or forward movement pattern. So as soon as my foot hits the ground and I make force or contact, I create force and I swing forward. Again, I'm going to let the bag fly. I'm going to sort of drop my arms and accelerate my arms, and then I'm going to pop the bag. I'm going to I'm trying to stop my arms and allow the bag to fly away from the club rather than swinging through it. Okay, now you can see that when I step forward, I'm actually doing the press movement. So I'm going to step forward. That forward momentum is going to allow me to create more hip speed than I would normally in a golf swing, so I have a bit of overspeed training. I then create good torque patterns. I stabilize, and then I get super stiffening because I don't swing through, but I pop the bag and I let the bag move away from the club. And you can see a little bit of everything occurring in that pattern. So then once we have the bag pattern, which is enhancing super stiffening, we can move to a step without the bag. Now I wanted to have this one for the short response, but sorry I didn't load that. But you'll get to see here. So all I'm doing now is I'm stepping exactly the same way I did with the bag, but except now all I do is I swing through and I don't hit the bag. So I make a normal swing pattern. What's amazing though, when you look at it biomechanically, if I've been working on the bag one first, that when I get through this release zone in here, I'm actually going to see some super stiffening, just like I would if I was striking the bag, but yet visually you'll see nothing. It just looks like I swung through. Biomechanically though, I have great stability and I have a lot of deceleration at the point of release. And obviously I'm creating an effective press forward. From like here, I have an effective press forward, so a lot like a baseball swing, and I'm pressing, and releasing. And then I just want to make one quick comment on this. Again, my left hip is higher than my right hip, but that's because my spine's tilted and I'm moving perpendicular to my spine. And that's a big difference between some of the things we talked about with the X Factor or the triple X Factor article. It's not about a lateral up and down movement, it's about the hips moving perpendicular to the spine orientation. So we get a really great response from this. And then the added benefit, and we're not talking about this today, and we will have some future webinars on creating power through plyometrics and overspeed training and all kinds of cool stuff. But because I'm swinging past my body, or because I'm starting out here with the club out ahead of my body, and I'm creating swing momentum, I'm essentially weighting the system. So it'd be a lot like swinging a weighted club. What I'm using is like a plyo implement that's like a 5-iron length and has the normal pendulum weight or swing weight of a 5-iron. But obviously I can take weight off and put weight on, and then I can do some underweighted, overweighted kind of stuff there. But even with the normal weighted club, you could just grab a 5-iron out of your bag. If I'm creating momentum from the having the club out in front of me, I'm weighting the system. So it's a lot like adding weight to the system or the club, which creates kind of a long response plyometric through the core and in the upper body as well. And so when I step forward, as soon as I put my foot on the ground, I'm trying to create forward change of direction, and I'm getting a plyo stretch on the muscles, and then I'm releasing out. And you'll notice that all these drills, whether I'm hitting a bag or not, I'm swinging up here a good 1.5 feet or so off the ground. I'm not down here. The last phase of anything that we would do would be down on a actual golf swing plane, because it's just obviously going to be more difficult to maintain that kind of posture. I have one other exercise, and then I can wrap up. I'm just close to my 45 minutes. So okay, let me throw out this last one. Now, this is getting into a little bit more, aggressive training. Once you have someone who moves effectively and can create the patterns, you can enhance the patterns. So one of the things that we've found that works really effectively, a lot of times what detracts from lower body speed and lower body contribution is excessive lower body movement. So unfortunately, especially in golf, one tends to think of lower body movement as thrusting the pelvis forward and turning the pelvis open like crazy. And unfortunately, those actions actually diminish your ability to create lower body speed. So what we try to do with our exercises is create environments where the lower body is isolated or more isolated, and so most of my action is forced to be a press, and then I need to turn inside my pelvis, okay? I don't know if this makes sense, but hopefully you'll start to get it the more we talk about this, but I need to turn inside my pelvis. I need to press forward, and then I need to turn inside my pelvis, which means I need to create internal rotation at the pelvis, or at the hips, not global torso sway or torso twisting. Hip speed, pelvic speed, when you look at the kinetic link, comes from pelvic rotation, and it has to come from within the pelvis or the context of the pelvis. So isolating it and minimizing the external or extracurricular type movements, the extra movements, focuses on turning and creating torque. Okay, so this drill is really effective once somebody knows how to move. This exercise is really effective. What we do is, and we do this a lot with our baseball guys, both throwing and hitting. So what this is what we're going to do is, if you can notice, I've spread my base out wider than comfortable, wider than my normal, say, baseball stride, which might be about 300% of my total hip width. Is a normal batter stride is somewhere between 350% of hip width. So I'm striding wider than that, not so wide that I'm off balance or I'm out of control, but I'm striding uncomfortably wide. Okay, and so then what I do is I do a long response type plyometric drill here with a wide stance. And what this actually does, believe it or not, I'm going to try to get into the actual movement here, is if you can watch, and I know you guys got a lag, but here I am in transition, and watch how I'm forced to turn within my pelvis and not create external movement because I can't with my base so wide. So what I end up doing is a really nice forward press. Boom, you already saw the forward press. I'm already creating tons of torque at my pelvis, which has already created peak hip speed, which, again, won't be as high as if I step or stride, but it's going to be really substantial. And then I have a wide base to create sort of a platform for stiffening, and then launch into the club or into the bag, and then again stiffen. Pop, pop, pop. So you're gonna pop the bag away as opposed to driving through the bag. Now, you don't want to draw back. You don't want to, you don't want to over accentuate this drawback this direction. You want to just stick it. I mean, maybe the best word rather than pop is stick. You want to stick the bag and then stop your hands and arms the best that you can. Now, obviously, you've got a lot of momentum. You're not going to stop them dead in their tracks, but you want to stop them the best that you can. And the reason that I think you don't want to do this drawback mechanism, we've done a bunch of studies with that. In fact, we did a bunch with Mike Bentley 7-8 years ago, is that when you draw back if it's too pronounced, then what happens is that you'll find that people start slowing down before they ever hit the bag. So what'll happen is, because they know they have to change direction and then pull the club way back, they'll actually be slowing down right in here so that they can pull back. Whereas what we want is we want full acceleration into contact and then stick it and sort of transfer and throw the bag, not swing through the bag, but throw the bag. In fact, you know, it's the best. These techniques are the best for anything. Even if you're, say, you're a boxer or a martial artist or something, you're trying to throw punches. It's not about, even though ultimately you punch through, it's about the stiffening at the point of impact. So the best throws, the best punches, the best kicks, the best golf swings have stiffening at the point of impact, even if you obviously look like you follow through, and you do follow through. But, you know, so we're trying to teach that stiffening in this drill. So that's the last exercise I had brought up for today. I'm a little over. I'm gone close to my hour, so I apologize for that. I thought I'd make this a little bit shorter to the point, but hopefully it was good information. And again, you can use these exercises directly. We use them, or our clients, I should say, use them. They've been developed and tested over a matter of, you know, a decade or more. But it's more about the concept. So if you employ the right concept, there are literally hundreds of variations of these things you can do in the gym, you can do on the practice tee. There's all kinds of variations you can do of the same pattern. You can once you start to actually create good mechanics, then you can start to do things like use unstable surfaces to even, you know, to create more proprioceptive awareness, so more balance, things like that. I would caution you from using those kinds of things first, because until you have a really solid movement pattern, you're just going to keep confusing the body, and you put somebody on a unstable surface and they don't even know how to grip the ground, and before you know it, they're doing all kinds of crazy compensations. Teach them how to move on the ground, then, you know, augment that training by creating unstable surfaces, or, you know, use some plyometrics, or use some speed training, or some, you know, different levels of stuff like that. You know, that would be fantastic. I know when it comes to training and implements and training aids and all kind of stuff, there's a ton of questions that people have. What works, what doesn't work. You know, so if you've got those kind of questions, type them in tonight, and or just email them to me, and I'll answer the best I can in a follow-up video, which I'll post. This video will be posted by tomorrow, and then I'll do a follow-up question answer that will be posted within the week. That's about it I have for today. Again, you know, hopefully you understand, the best thing is you can't just, or the most important thing I should say is you can't just take an exercise, generically give it to somebody, and not really know what it is that they're trying to do with it, and have success. It'll be hit and miss. Some people, I should say, will have success, and you're not really too sure why, and some people won't, you're not really too sure why. So the key to this is understanding the pattern, applying it when it's appropriate to someone who has a faulty pattern, or, you know, where you're trying to enhance a pattern, and then knowing what you're trying to accomplish with the exercise. Those things are the most important. You know, if I go all the way back to the beginning, that little separation drill, you know, so I'll finish up on this, and I'll let you guys go. If we go back to here, our separate, that's our press. Let's just go to the more separation thing, where we're standing on the ground. Again, this isn't about separation. This isn't about torso separation. This isn't about trying to get the most X factor you can. This is about how you grip the ground. If you're not aware of that, you'll have people twisting and turning, and they won't get a thing out of this, because they won't be gripping the ground right. So you need to know what it is you're trying to get out of the exercise, and why you're applying the exercise. Apply it appropriately, and you'll have fantastic results. And this kind of training is missing right now. You know, you've got your great gym stuff, and you've got your great, you know, instruction, and then there's no real bridge between the two. This kind of functional movement stuff has been done, you know, in track and field and all kinds of other sports for a while. It's time that, you know, we start bringing it into the golf arena, and I think, you know, we'll see amazing results in a very short period of time. In a matter of years, we'll see a lot of change in performance at all levels of golf, including obviously the PGA and top levels, but, you know, in your amateur level golf, I think you're going to see an amazing improvement using concepts and techniques, and then technology like 3D motion analysis and what have you. So I appreciate everyone joining in. Sorry I ran the full hour, but hopefully it was useful information. And again, this will be posted on the website by tomorrow, and the follow-up question and answer stuff will be posted by next week. And next week, I'm not sure exactly when we're going to do it. It won't be a Thursday. We have some other things going on, but I'll definitely try to do our next one on some plyo training, and then we'll do some speed training stuff, and then we'll probably move on to some other sports. But we've got at least another few weeks of golf ahead of us, so hopefully you guys will join us in the future. I appreciate you joining in, and I wish everyone a good night, and hopefully you got some good information out of this. Thanks.